on her and what she does. But she's a school board president of Springboro, Ohio, down in Southern Ohio. And she also is the president of the Ohio School Board's Leadership Council. So she's helping lead other school boards, and she's also helping cultivate school board leaders. Following that, we'll have Robert Latimer, and he is for the Citizens of Objective Public Education. And with no further ado, I would like to introduce Kelly Kohls.
Thank you.
And let's give her a round of applause. I'm all the best. Kelly got to be a TV star today. We were at Brunswick Active Television, and we're going to try to get that up on the internet. So if you have any kids that know how to do YouTube, please let them contact me, because I need help.
I wanted to thank everybody for the invite. I've been to this area now a couple times to speak, and I so appreciate being able to let people know what is going on in education. It is extremely important. I use my time, my kids, I have 5 children, and they're home from school now, but they understand why I leave the house. They understand why I work as much as I do. They say, Mom, you're on the phone all the time. I said, but I really am trying to save your world. I hope you understand that. And they do. And they've been grateful, and people out there tell me that they brag about me. So I think it's going okay. But I do have to be home at some point to educate them. Actually, they're doing pretty well right now. 3 of them are in college, so pretty much we're broke. And 2 more are coming through high school, and we're going to be even worse off pretty soon. But Connie talked about the enemy, and for quite a while as a parent, I didn't know that education was failing our students, so I thought everything was hunky-dory. My objections were that the school district kept coming to us saying, we need more money, we need more money, we need more money. And I thought, surely you have enough. You have $55 million for 5,500 students. Isn't that enough? And at what point will it be enough? Or is there no such thing as enough? But we were coming to the end of our financial pocket, our bank, and we were saying, surely it's enough. So I was trying to do our homework at our house, saying, do we really pay enough, or do we pay less than other districts? And I started doing homework and putting that homework in people's mailboxes in my neighborhood. And a couple of them called and said, Kelly, you need to run for school board. And I said, yeah, never thought about that. I'm busy, I'm raising my family, but like everybody else is. But they talked me into it, and I ran and I won, so now I had a seat. I was sitting there, though, completely alone as a person with a conservative mindset. I did not feel that the other 4 board members were like-minded whatsoever, and I felt very alone. So what I started doing was I started talking to other school board members that whenever I would talk, somebody would say, well, you need to talk to this school board member at, let's say, Marysville, or Olentangy, or Knox County, the school district. So I would start to talk to those other conservative school board members, and we started to form this coalition where we could network and say, does your school do this, or how do you guys handle this? And it was great. I finally had people that were thinking the way I think, and that's how do we educate the students with the best we can offer for the money we have. Not a never-ending, bottomless pit of money, but with the money we have. And we were able to figure things out pretty well. I always articulated my vote, and of course I was a 1 vote, and the other 4 voted differently, but that's okay, because I would always say why I voted the way I did. And I think it started making sense to my community, because in November before last, they hired 2 more people just like me, so we took board majority, and I became board president. So it's worked out that as long as we keep the communication going, then there really is no enemy. The enemy is, guys, now I've determined, apathy. And you are here because you don't want that to be your enemy, right? You want to know what's going on, and that's why you're here. So thank you for the invite. I would love to help you understand, because the enemy is you staying home and not learning. And you not conveying this message to more people. That scares me more than standing in front of you. It's really not my strong suit. Never imagined myself doing this. I was a university professor, though, so I did have to stand in front of people and teach. But I'm going to move on with the information, because you're all waiting to hear why is Common Core good or why is Common Core bad. There are resources, lots of resources. If you Google Common Core, you will learn a lot very quickly. So let me just narrate some of that right now. And Claire, first slide, please. Ohio Education and Common Core. First ask, why are we even considering national standards? I'm going to get to that first, because it makes sense that Ohio became victims of Common Core. And I'm going to tell you why. We don't have a bunch of evil people sitting up in Columbus. We have smart people. We have conservative people. But we have people who have been sold, I think, a bill of goods. But I want to show you why. Okay, and next, whose agenda is this? What's the end product? Next slide, please. Okay, so here's what I want to show you. This is from the Cato Institute. Every slide, you're welcome to a copy of any of them so you can share them with your friends. Just ask me, hey, Kelly, send me that whole slide presentation. I'll send it to you. You send it on to other people. Because this is what's going on. This is since 1970 to 2012. The line is broken at the top because it goes on to 12. But that's the money. The blue line is the money we've been spending on education over that time. The red, green, and purple are the scores on math, science, and reading. So we've been throwing money at it, right? Boatloads of money towards education. It has not made a difference in our results. Next slide, please. Go ahead.
This is just our whole state of Ohio?
No, this is our country. This is the United States. Next slide. This is, see the greenish yellow line? That's against spending. But the bottom two lines going across the bottom are the SAT score. So that's the upper level students taking SAT to try to get into college. That's reading and math. And again, throwing money at the system, no change in results. Next slide, please. Okay, why? And this, I do longer presentations on why education is failing your students. I've done some here in Medina. So I go into this in more detail. Here, I'm just giving you a glimpse. But in the state of Ohio, so this is Ohio, we took a waiver back in, it was probably mid-'80s, of the No Child Left Behind Act. And in that waiver, we said, okay, we don't want to follow that act because it would make us all look bad. So instead, what we've done in Ohio is we've made our own standards, and we've made our own grading of those standards. So these are the proficiency scores. So let me just go through this. I guess in something this large, I need a little pointer of some kind. But let's look at what does it take for your student to be proficient in third grade reading. Okay, so there's standardized tests in third grade. When the students take those tests, they get a nice little printout that comes home. And the printout will tell you how your student scored. Your student needs to only answer 57% of the questions correctly in third grade reading to be proficient. Your school district only needs 75% of your students to score that or higher to get that mark as one of the 26 education indicators. Well, let's keep going. Let's look through those. So a student in 7th grade reading only needs to pass or answer correctly 45% of the questions, and they're called proficient. So they can fail these exams and be called proficient. That's what our state has come up with as the bar that we have to meet. Okay? And then we go all the way to 7th grade math. In 7th grade math, the student only needs to answer correctly 32% of the questions, and they are called proficient. And again, only 75% of the students need to be proficient for you to get a mark on the 26 indicators, for you to get one of those. And you see, it doesn't take much to get excellent, because Southwestern and Columbus failed 13 of the 26 indicators and was still rated excellent. Failed half of those indicators. Couldn't even make 75% of their students fail the exam. It got worse. So you see how ridiculous the system is? We're not grading anybody. It's ridiculous. What is a benefit to us today is that our legislators and our Ohio School Board have admitted it. For years, they've not told anybody anything. But some of my slides came right from the Ohio School Board and the Ohio Department of Ed. It's new that they're actually telling us we're failing. They've seen this data. Across the nation, we've seen the same data in every state where we said we have no bar. If you want to talk about a low bar, we're talking about the state of Ohio's bar is on ground and been run over 12 times. So let's just not even talk about a bar. This is silly. It's silly that we call somebody who only passed 32% of the questions correct, we call them proficient. Okay? So we've not been holding anybody to any standards. We've not been holding anybody accountable to the standardized tests. So it makes us look bad, right? True of all the states across the nation, they've been doing the same thing, except for one state, Massachusetts. Massachusetts never took the waiver. They're the only state in our country that didn't take the waiver to get out of No Child Left Behind. And they said, you know what? We're going to call it like it is in this state. We're going to take our lumps because our citizens are going to tell us we're terrible. But we're going to rise up to the bar. We're going to make our bar something that is tough to reach, but we'll get there. They didn't do this. So guess who leads the nation in academics? Massachusetts. Massachusetts standards have been rated by the Fordham Institute to be an A. Fordham Institute rates Common Core at a B. So I'll come back to this quite a few times. Why don't we take Massachusetts standards and adopt them? Let's use a model that works and use that. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is the number of schools that have gotten excellent. Let's look back at 2002, 2003, 85 school districts in the state of Ohio were rated excellent. Today we have 352 that are rated excellent. Now, it makes sense that we think that we've been doing better and better and better with education. Is that true? The answer is no. What we've done was lower and lower and lower that cut scores so that more and more schools got to make it. Okay? That's all we've done. The Ohio School Board told me that. I'm not making that up. Next slide, please. Okay, this is just the number of students that are ready for college-level coursework. And in this assessment, it looks like 71% of our students that graduate high school are ready for college-level coursework in English. Only 49% are ready for college level in math, reading 58, and science only 35. There's a disconnect between how we're graduating our students and what it takes in minimum competencies to get into college. Right now, the state average across all districts of the number of students that graduate that cannot get into college without taking a catch-up course is 41%. 41% of our students that graduate cannot get into college without taking a remedial math or English course. That's pretty big. That tells us that there's a significant disconnect between the K through 12 education system and what it takes to get into college. Next slide, please. Okay, Ohio education, what do we do? Next slide. Earlier, let me give you some history. I don't know, this slide might be out of place. I worked till late last night on these, so my next presentation will be smoother. Sorry, you're the guinea pigs on this. But Lamar Alexander in 1989 made out some new, was talking about new schools, the schools of the future. And he was talking about schools of the future where they take a baby as young as 3 months old and then they educate that child until they're 18. So this whole vision came about long, long ago. And the vision is starting to come true. Do you know what Obama's doing now? Preschool, nationalized preschool. It's going to keep going, guys. So that this whole, you've heard cradle to grave, it's coming true. But it started way back, before the Obama administration. The idea came about, and you know they soundbite us into compliance. And because we, I think, are so weak, and we don't know the truth, and we don't know the facts, we just kind of say, oh, okay, that sounds good. Well, that makes sense. Because they have a really good rationale that they've worked through for quite a while. And we think, well, we don't know any better, so that makes sense. And because you know that now if Ohio education is failing us, you might think, well, yeah, maybe we need to start them younger. That's not the answer either. Okay, so he was saying 3 months, open all year from 6 to 6. That was his vision. He was a U.S., I think, senator or congressman. And he was saying this up at a podium. We have a film of him doing that. This agenda started prior to Obama, but has escalated since the stimulus bill came out, which that's after Obama. It's $4.35 billion. Arnie Duncan, and he's the Arnie Duncan, the head of the Federal Department of Education, admitted money would be used to be a catalyst for Common Core. So they knew that this $4.35 billion was going to be used to get all these states online with Common Core. So guess how they did it? They made Race to the Top a competition. Race to the Top is where the school districts got money to participate in adopting the Common Core standards, using them, doing the teacher evaluations, using the tests to measure whether they work or not. So they were, in essence, offering their students up to be the guinea pigs for the start of this. Now, the problem was Ohio wanted some of that money. Of course we did. Every state, lots of states wanted some of that money. Some states said, yeah, no thanks, but Ohio said, we want some of that money. Ohio didn't make it through the first round, didn't get the money. Came back, they still had money. Ohio got in on the second round of money. Ohio got $400 million in Race to the Top monies. So there are a lot of school districts across the state that got money, and a lot of school districts across the state who have spent that money, and I'll get back to that in a second, but they obligated themselves to accept Common Core standards at that point in the Race to the Top acceptance of money. So it kind of bound our state to accept Common Core at that stage. There's another place that they contractually obligated Ohioans into Common Core. Next slide, please. I'll get to that in a minute. Okay, what's been done in the last few years? Our legislators, the Ohio School Board, have helped us out in several things. Now listen, they obligated us to 6 things, that they would do these 6 things in order for us to get a waiver from the No Child Left Behind. So we've reapplied and I think, gotten that waiver. But they obligated us to 6 things. One of the first things they obligated us to was the 3rd grade reading guarantee. Have you heard of that? Okay. When I start talking to people, mostly the educators, I say, what happens? Why do we have 41% on average of our students that can't get into college? They'll say to us, and it's probably true, that a lot of the errors that are happening in education are happening at the younger years. And if a student can't read by the 4th grade, then that difficulty or that deficiency just spirals. And then that student, then it sets them up not to succeed at the upper levels. So we've got to correct things at the lower levels. So that makes sense. Let's get this 3rd grade reading guarantee, which means that 100% of our students must pass a certain proficiency in 3rd grade to progress to the 4th grade. Now that's a nightmare for most districts. So of course they want to make sure every student reads at that level, and that's the plus, is that there's due diligence on every single student and making sure they read. I think this is a blessing. I think it's a great thing. We have to have these bars and these standards that the kids must meet before they progress. For many years, guys, we've let them go on. Even though we knew they weren't reading at the 3rd grade level, we let them go on. In fact, I had asked our principal in our district, this is before I was on the board, I wanted to hold my son back in 2nd grade. And he just said, no, you don't want to do that. That's catastrophic. Talk me out of it. And I wish he hadn't have done that. Because again, I don't think educationally he was ready. Socially he was. But he's struggled all along now. And he's not done what my other kids in school have done. And he struggles more. I wish I had gone ahead and done that. Now, they'll have to keep him back. Or anybody else that doesn't meet those 3rd grade reading guarantee. Also, what the state instituted, so this is new, and I think it's in place for this next school year. Anybody know? I think this next school year they have to meet this. Now, also, they've added the A through F grading system. The A through F, and I'll get to that in a minute. I think I've got a slide on it. They've added OTES, OPES, and SLOs, which is an evaluation system. So now, we're going to evaluate teaching effectiveness. We're going to evaluate the effectiveness of the principal, and start it with student learning objectives. That's SLOs. So there's an evaluation tool now that we have to have in place, and I think that's in the next year as well. And we have HB, I think it's SB 165. That bill was passed, and we have to have a test in place by July this year. And it says that all districts must teach the original context of the 6 Founding Father documents. It's like the state is, I know, it's wonderful. It's like the state is finally acknowledging that we have veered so far away from our Constitution that they've had to put it into law that we get back to it. It's kind of silly, but we've let that happen because of what? Apathy. Because people like you weren't here listening to stuff like this and getting you motivated to be an activist for your children and for your society. We have gone away and we have adjusted American history. We have taught one side of controversial issues and not both sides. Our children aren't taught to think critically. They're taught that this is the fact. Evolution is not fact. Evolution is a theory. Man-made global warming is a theory, but it's taught as fact. You see how we've departed from what we know to be truth and what we know to be fiction and what we know should be teaching these kids to think critically. The state is having to legislate it back to us. And it's frustrating to me as a school board member that just last Thursday, I had 3 news channels meet me outside our board meeting for comments. They were calling me all day long because we were trying to write a policy that went, ACLU's written me 2 letters threatening us. Freedom from Religion's written me 1 letter threatening us. All we wanted to do was write a policy that said that teachers must teach both sides or all sides of controversial issues and teach the science. That, for example, and then we listed the controversial issues. Well, we listed a word in there that is a lightning rod word, and that's not our intent. Our intent is to let there be academic freedom. I want teachers to feel free to say the word, maybe, not to evangelize, not to preach, but to say there are huge holes in evolution. Let me tell you what they are. But right now, they're so afraid to veer away from the textbooks that they don't feel free to tell the students that. But we're just trying to put it back in there, and we're getting enormous pushback. And so I've been on many news channels over the last 3 years. I don't mind the controversy because sometimes we have to talk about it. The dialogue's good. Let's keep talking about it. Anyway, complaints of all of this stuff, and then the next 2, is that it doesn't involve enough teachers. And I agree, but I know that even in my own district, that there's resistance to change. And so sometimes even the teachers who are there, they're in the trenches, they're there every day teaching those kids, they may be a little uncomfortable with change. So sometimes we've got to kind of push it, ask them, are you sure you don't want to teach that? Are you sure that's not the best thing for the student? Because sometimes it's just a matter of, you're a conservative, you don't know what my life is like, and that's absolutely true. But we need to keep talking about what's going on in education. And I'm not sure that they're getting the full picture either. So the conversations are a little difficult, but we do need to involve our educators in all of these conversations. And they're not being involved at any level of Common Core. The 5th thing that we obligated ourselves to in this state is called Common Core. I'll describe that more in a minute. And the 6th thing we obligated ourselves to in both Race to the Top application and the No Child Left Behind waiver, we contractually agreed to all 6 of these in both of those. So withdrawing from Common Core, do you see how that puts them in a pickle? They already contractually agreed to the 2, 5 and 6. They're not sure at this point if they'll have to pay back the $200 million they already spent. It makes them very nervous. You know what I say, guys? Bring it. Federal government, you're telling us that this was a stimulus package. You didn't tell us we had to do it. Come back and ask these school districts, these struggling school districts, to give you back $200 million. Let's see how that goes over in the PR. Tell them, bring it. Let's have the conversation, but let's have it in the national news. That not only was this not a voluntary, competitive kind of fun thing, you bought the program. You paid them, and now you're expecting them to pay it back? Anyway, complaints are not involving enough teachers or citizens. That's what I wanted to add. Next slide, please. Okay, 3rd grade reading guarantee. I'm just going to read through these real quick because I kind of described it. Approved the state lawmakers in spring of 2012. It's a part of Senate Bill 316. September 11th, which was this last year, the board did vote to approve the cut scores of 390 for 2012 and 13 and 392 for 2013 and 14. These are below that proficient level, but above basic, which is the next lower grade if you're rating. Next slide, please. I may be able to describe this better. So, I'm sorry, that last slide. What they were referring to is that students must be able to read, and we went through the different grade levels. Can you go back several slides where we looked at the proficiency levels? How many questions they had to answer correctly? It's that shaded red, Clara. That's it. So third grade reading, they had to answer 57% of the questions correctly. Okay, in order for them to be passed on to fourth grade now, they don't have to answer 57, they can answer less than that correctly. And they'll go ahead and put them on. So the bar, again, is low. It's not that hard to make the bar. So they're still really not raising the bar much, but any step is better than what we have. Next slide, please. Or let's go on to that other one, Claire. Okay. Several states, including Florida and Texas, have had third grade reading guarantees in place for about a decade. Florida has seen percentages of their students or fourth graders who can read rise since putting the requirement in, but Texas has not. So I think it has a lot to do with what all you do with it. Obviously, we're going to have to look at the two states and say, what did they do right in Tennessee? Next slide, please. Okay, this is just a number of superintendents who believe that OTES, which is Ohio Teachers Evaluation System, will actually improve education. We don't know if it will, but we know that there are certain things that are markers for an effective educator. We know that the Ohio Department of Education in May of last year gave a slide presentation to hundreds of us in the audience, educators and school board members. And what they said was, there are certain things that make an educator a more effective educator. And the markers were someone that scored high on their praxis exam. It's like a national board exam that teachers have to take to get their license. The higher the score, the more effective that educator was. They also found that the higher the degrees, like the master's degree and years of service, did not correlate with teaching effectiveness. So they discontinued the use of the requirement of the master's degree 4 years ago. Teachers no longer are required to get their master's degrees because they found it to be negatively correlated with teaching effectiveness. And the years of service, so it kind of says we probably shouldn't be doing the step schedule. We should probably be looking at effectiveness in the classroom and maybe rewarding based on the effectiveness in the classroom, right? So that's why we instituted OTES, so now we can evaluate how they teach in the classroom. It's a good thing. I think it's a value. There's still some pushback because student scores will now be calculated in this formula. Next slide, please. Okay, Ohio Teachers Evaluation System has its critics. The critics say that it's dishonest, unrealistic, not fully supported by academic research. I think that's wrong. You know, so we're going to hear sometimes that it doesn't work, it's not good. I hear that from usually people who don't want accountability. And I'm saying, I'm quite sure it has its flaws, but let's work through them because we still need an evaluation system that works. So let's just make sure that we perfect the system that there is. I was a professor for 8 years at Miami University. We did not have a union, so it didn't have that kind of, I guess, protection, if that's what you want to call it. We, though, had to create a document at the end of each year that proved we were an effective educator. So we used both internal and external measures of teaching effectiveness. So we had that system in place. And to be honest with you, I'll tell you a little story, that my first year there, my superintendent evaluated all of us, as he did, and he evaluated me less than acceptable in all three categories, teaching, research, and service. And this is the fear of teachers, is that you can get a principal in here that just really doesn't like you and start evaluating you poorly. But if you have data, that's hard to do. But in my case, I went to the dean, and the dean was the only one that could overturn that decision. So I'm using those examples in our education system and saying if we have an appropriate appeal process where a teacher who feels that the evaluation was unjust and unfair can go to the appeal group, and the appeal group is made of a variety of people, and they can overturn the decision, and they know it all to be fair, that's what we're looking for. In my case, the dean said, you know, Dr. Kohls, I am not likely to overturn his decision. We give the department chair sole discretion, which we would in our case for the principals, sole discretion over these evaluations and how to divvy up the money we give them due to the evaluations. Well, you understand, I'm not likely to overturn this decision. And if I did, it would send a message across campus that he was blatantly unfair. You understand I'm not likely to do that. I said, I understand. So the next week she brought us all three in, herself, him, and I. And the whole time she was asking him question after question after question. And then she said, thank you, Dr. Kohls, and we'll be in touch. Well, the next day he stepped down, and she gave all the women in the department an equity increase, and she overturned every single category. So she found it not only blatantly unfair, but that he needed to not be a department chair anymore. So I'm saying that it happens. Unfair evaluations happen. They happen in everybody's job. But as long as we have an appeal process that we all have established and we believe is fair, I think we can work through the hiccups to the system. And those principals who are evaluating unfairly need to get out of education. And we need to make sure our appeal committee can say, no. And I think we got to work to make sure we do that, because we have to protect teachers. I think they're working hard. I am a teacher. I'm likely to be fairly protective of them. We have some teachers that absolutely need to get out of education. No doubt about it. This will help us make that determination. Okay, next slide, please. OTES will. OTES is the teacher evaluation system that says 50% of the evaluation should be based on performance standards and 50% on student growth. So it's the 50% on student growth that makes people nervous. They know they're professionals, so the other side's pretty easy. They know they can keep their classroom neat, the planning, all that done well. They're more worried about how the students do. And that's true. So we're looking at a measure that measures a student's ability to move forward. So you look at that student's history. Because one teacher may have more inclusion students, that's students that are more difficult to teach, versus another teacher that has less of those. So one progress of a class may be less than the other progress, but it's based on their demographics of their students and not on, so you have to measure that student's aptitude to move ahead a year. So all of that's kind of been worked out. It's going to be fair. I know you're all looking at me. Okay, I don't get it, but that's all right. Trust me, they're trying to work through everything to make the system fair so that we're not looking at one whole class versus the next whole class. We're looking at the student's ability to move forward. That makes sense? So we're going to have 4 categories. We're going to have accomplished, proficient, developing, and effective. Next slide, please. Or what is that? I'm not sure about that. Anyway, A through F, read through this real quick because I got to get to the Common Core stuff. What's disappointing about the A through F rating system is that I told you 75% of your students need to be proficient or above. The only thing this changes is that 80% need to be proficient or above. It's really such a tiny little baby step that it's disappointing. But even so, only 22 districts today would be an A. So it's helpful to say you can no longer be at the top all the time, everybody. That we're going to have to discriminate somehow, and this is a good way to do it. Next slide, please. You'll hear more about that one later. So this is what that's showing. The excellent distinction right now, there's 352 districts. If we applied this 80% of your students need to be proficient or above, 22 districts would be. Next slide, please. Okay, SB 165, I kind of explained that. Next slide, please. Okay, the purpose of Common Core. Here we go. The purpose of Common Core was to impose nationally recognized rigorous standards so our students can be competitive in a global job market and be compared state to state. That sounds fabulous, doesn't it? That's what we need. Globally, we're failing. We're absolutely failing. And we're throwing gobs of money at it, not working. Okay? So far, it's adopted by 45 states and DC. In the past, the key players in the national global education takeover were progressive, such as Achieve, the National Governors Association, which is NGA, and the Chiefs Council of State School Officers. They own the copyrights. NGA owns the copyrights to the standards. So if and once you adopt those standards, they cannot be changed. Ohio does not have the ability to change those standards. They're there, they're done, they're concrete. The only thing we can do in this state is add 15% to them. I don't know what that means. I don't know if anybody knows what that means. It's adding 15% to gobbledygook in the first place. How do you measure gobbledygook? So, I mean, it makes no sense to me. But that 15%, let's just say that Ohio said, you know what, we're going to teach the original context of the 6 Founding Father documents. That's in addition to what is in the Common Core standards. There's no test, though, that measures that. So what do we teach to, guys? We teach to the test, don't we? It's just how it is. What else would we teach to? I don't object to that. We're going to teach to something and make sure everybody's trying to teach to that something. So I'm okay that it's the test. So what else would we do? But the test dictates everything. Everything. So even if we said we want our students to understand these 6 founding father documents, it doesn't matter because it's not going to be on the test. We can do that, we can add that, but why would we do that? Why wouldn't we focus in on what's on the test? So they know that. If it's not going to be tested, they're not going to teach it. And I can't make them. Okay, in 1990, they tried to create a national history standards, but it was stopped after our U.S. Senate rejected it 99-1. It was seen as anti-American and too politically correct. Well, isn't that how we live today? Our textbooks are anti-American and too politically correct. So they've moved there anyway. But what they found out at that time, the people who wanted this national standards to go through, is that they shouldn't call it national standards. That if we change the name to state standards, it sounds better. So they stopped using national standards and went on to this other wording and called it state. It is a national standard progressive movement, trust me. And they found out that if you imposed them quickly and quietly, you could get it done. Well, that's what happened. Strickland put it in his budget bill, HB 1, in 2010. The next month, the standards were released. So he obligated us to it before they were ever completed. That was kind of quickly and quietly. I don't think anybody saw that. And you start with less controversial subjects. So you start with math and English, because that's not as controversial. History was very controversial, and people caught on quickly. So when asking the school board, we met with a couple of people from the Ohio School Board, me and Clara and Connie, and we said, well, what about social studies? What was the other one? Science and social studies. And they said, oh, we won't adopt those. And we said, well, why? Well, they're too controversial. You know what? We'll just wait till a different school board gets in there, and then you'll adopt those. I mean, really, I just don't trust it. Common Core is Common Core, and there are 4 pieces to it. We've adopted 2. Okay, next slide, please. Unaccountable outsiders. For example, Bill Ayers is very involved in every piece of Common Core, beginning to end. He's a key player. We believe this violates 3 federal statutes. I know that people are looking into that. We have legal teams across the country looking into that. Gates Foundation has spent over $300 million in every part of this whole Common Core national standards. I'm not going to fall for that one, guys. I'm not going to call it Common Core state standards. I'll go ahead and call it what I think it is. Okay? And then also has the Bill Gates Foundation has funded many organizations, Achieve being one of them, but also the Fordham Institute. The Fordham Institute, I think they've got a headquarters in Dayton, but we met with a few people who represent the Fordham Institute when we met that day. And, we were in there for just a nice, friendly dialogue. We had some really good questions. We were all equipped knowing as much as we could know about Common Core, had great questions. And we were met with some very kind of disturbing attitudes. I felt like if you have an argument for something and you have the data, you have the facts, you don't have to be emotional, do you? You really just want to present your evidence or your information. But I found that we were really treated like they were disgusted with us. Why are you getting so emotional? I don't understand. But as we started doing more homework afterwards, because we got these scoffs, you just don't understand. And, okay, make us. Please, just tell us. What don't we understand? And our questions really didn't get answered. But I found out later that the Fordham Institute has gotten over $6 million from the Gates Foundation to support Common Core. So they were there sitting at the table, and we're asking questions, and their only mindset was, we're supporting Common Core. So nothing you can say can convince us not to. And in fact, I'm tired of your questions. That's what we got. And afterwards, Terry Ryan, who represents the Fordham Institute, wrote a blog where he called us right-wing radical, help me out, girls, Christian with money to back us. I don't know, guys. Bob, do you have money? Are you hiding it from us? That we were well-funded. This comes out of the Kohls pocketbook. My travel expenses come out of my budget. So we have no money backing us. We're just simply sitting there asking questions that they're so disgusted we're asking, that doesn't make sense. Why would you be frustrated because we're asking questions? We just want to know what you're teaching our children.
Mobilizing.
Well, that's probably frustrating the tar out of them, is that more and more of you are getting more and more aware. Darn it. Okay, so Pearson Corporation. Pearson is a book publishing company that publishes most of our textbooks in education. They have expanded and they've started buying up all of the publishers. So they will be the ones that make out on this. So if you think about this, the PARC assessments, which is the next stage, well, let me get to that in a minute, okay? ACTs and SATs will be aligned with Common Core. So those national exams will be. The broad agenda is to completely destroy public education and privatize it. There are some YouTube videos that are really good that describe all of this stuff. I'm just touching on it, but I want you to say, okay, I remember her talking about the broad agenda. Trust me, you'll get more information if you go to commoncore.com. Ohioans Against Common Core. There's a bunch of websites if you just Google. You'll learn a lot more about this. Now, I'm not against privatizing education necessarily. I'm a proponent of school choice. I think school choice will fix what ails education because competition will hold the system accountable like it's never been held accountable before. So I'm all for it. I don't believe Common Core will get us where we want to go, though. I want to take Common Core out of the equation and still put school choice back in. Next slide, please. The test. Here's where we get to the key element in all of this. It's not the bunch of Common Core state standards that are written beautifully, makes it sound like we're going to have these brilliant kids come out of the system all of a sudden, which is not true. The testimonies are absolutely the opposite of the people who are on the validation committees for both English language and math. The scientists, mathematician, the English language arts specialists that are looking at these say they will not. They'll in fact put our students 2 years behind in these subjects. Anyway, Smart Balance Assessment Consortium is one of the examination companies that we could pick from. The other one is called PARC, Partnership for Assessment for Readiness for College and Career. That's PARC. Ohio signed on and contractually agreed to use PARC. Now, if you watch Glenn Beck, he's been telling everybody that Ohio is out of PARC. That is not true. All that happened was the word PARC was removed from the budget bill. The money for the technological upgrades is still there. So the plan was that the Ohio State budget includes, I think it's $10 million for more IT development and to help schools get IT ready because the tests are going to happen online. So everybody's going to have a computer in front of them. I'm trying to do the math for you guys. I've already thought this through, but if every student eventually has a computer in front of them and they're doing all of these tests multiple times a year on the computer, right? Who makes out on that deal?
Bill Gates.
Okay, so Bill Gates, the whole Bill Gates Foundation, it's an investment. The $300 million I talked about, that's an investment. He's a brilliant guy. So you can't fault him for that, but it's an investment. But as long as they have a computer in front of them, what's to keep them from not putting all the teachers on the computer in front of them? And then do we really need the teaching profession or do we just need room monitors? I mean, I think that if the teacher profession really thought this through all the way to the end, they would absolutely be opposed to this. Because I see the computerization, and now all we need is somebody to walk around and make sure you're looking at what you're supposed to be looking at. And that all the textbooks will be online. Pearson's going to make sure of that. And they're going to make sure that they're the ones publishing them. And they're all going to be e-books. So we don't need hard copy books anymore. We likely don't need that instructor in front of students anymore. And I said this at a board meeting. I'm not sure if everybody caught on. But I said, look, I want a teacher in front of my kids. I want a teacher in front of my students. Now, you know, I've had plenty of frustration with their labor unit. That's all I can say. Plenty of frustration. But I do believe that human interaction, that human input is key to kids learning. I do believe that we've just not been holding a bar to education. That's where we've gone wrong. Not that we've had the people in the classroom be the wrong people or do the wrong thing. We've not been holding anybody accountable in the system. That's what's wrong. But anyway, they're all going to be online, so we know who makes out on that deal. And Pearson's going to get all the contracts. I'm quite sure of that. He's going to be able to, and they're all going to be Common Core compliant. So does anybody really have a choice not to do it? If everything that every homeschooler, Catholic schooler, Christian schooler, charter school, conversion school, public school, all those schools will have the same materials, exactly the same materials, and they'll all be online. So we're talking huge transformation in education. Ohio signed on to PARC and must be taking the PARC test by the 14-15 school year. That's what we obligated ourselves to. So far, the large assessment tools that have been used across the country have been crashing. That they have maybe 3 school districts that'll take the test on the same day, and the bottleneck in the technology happens and the whole system crashes. So right now the system's a mess. They haven't worked it out. I'm grateful for that because it might help us postpone the implementation of Common Core for a while because the assessment tool is not there. Now I believe we need to discontinue Common Core altogether, but right now I've developed a resolution that's on our website, OSBLC, that just asks them to postpone implementation for a couple more years. And yes, I do hope that we find out more about it and that we decide that it's not good for Ohio in that couple of years. Maybe that'll happen. Next slide, please. Okay, who develops and pays for this effort? Tests are designed by progressive reformers. Linda Darling Hammond, a radical Stanford professor, Bill Ayers, a colleague of Bill Ayers, opposes standardized testing and prefers journalism. That's Linda Darling Hammond. U.S. Department of Education gave the 2 SBAC, which is the Smarter Balance Test Consortium, and PARC $360 million. So who is controlling the test? The U.S. Department of Education. Right? And so what do we do in every state? We're going to teach to that test. And the test is guided by the federal government. So forget states' rights. Forget that these national standards are being called state standards. The test was written by the federal government. So you can't kind of convince me that the standards are written by the state, but the test is written by the federal government. Whoa, let's talk about departure of the two. That's not going to happen. We're not going to write standards to meet their test. I wonder, is it just me, if the test hasn't already been written of what we want the kids to know, and the standards were kind of frou-frou put together at the end. And then now, oops, curriculum has to match that, guys. Okay, that's what I say. Once the money is gone, it's up to the states to continue to pay for all of these investments that we just talked about, millions and millions and millions. One thing I wanted to tell you, if you go online and you look at the OSBLC's debate, okay, OSBLC, and you've got a flyer in your hands, go there and you can look at the Common Core debate. You will hear C. Todd Jones. C. Todd Jones was with the Bush administration who helped develop the No Child Left Behind Act. He knows all about it. He's very, very bright. He's on the Ohio School Board. Very informative. But C. Todd Jones said during that debate, and you'll hear him, say that he believes Common Core will crumble. Okay, so your next valid question is, when does it crumble? Does it crumble before we spend hundreds of millions of dollars on the technology and the materials and supplies, the textbooks, or does it crumble after we've spent all the money? I think it should crumble now. Let's just lick our wounds and move on. Those schools that adopted Race to the Top competitive grant monies then have already invested some money, but that money came from the federal government, so it's not like it really came out of their budget. So I think they can stop doing what they're doing, that Ohio as a state needs to develop Ohio standards for Ohio children, and not any kind of national standards. I think we can use Massachusetts as a model. We can use Indiana, Texas, Tennessee, District of Columbia, and California. All 6 of those states were rated A for standards, above Common Core, by the Fordham Institute. They admitted themselves. Those 6 states have better standards than they do in Common Core. Pardon?
Where's Ohio?
Ohio is, I think, a C. Yes, Ohio is a C. Common Core is a B. So that just means that our words aren't strong enough. Well, let's change the words. Let's keep doing what we're doing. It doesn't cost us anything to keep doing what we're doing, but let's raise that bar. Let's stop accepting failing grades as proficient. And let's say, guys, you need to teach. And maybe it's an all-year-round school. Maybe it's, let's keep talking. Maybe instead of a 7.25-hour day, we have to go to an 8-hour day. Maybe there's some things we can do. I'm just saying. There's a variety of options here. And I can't go any further. Let's see. These will assess subjective performance-based outcomes. Next slide, please. I want to give you this maybe a little later. It's too much narrative for me today. Clara, next one. Again, I can send you these slides. Next slide, please. Okay, this is what kind of bothers me about Common Core. So this was a presentation given to lots of people from the Ohio Department of Education. Do you guys see a word in here that bothers you at all? Kind of look at what they think the preparedness for college, career, citizenship, and lifelong learning requires knowledge, skills, and disposition. Knowledge, does that make sense? Skills, yeah, that makes sense. What the heck is disposition? Do you know what disposition is? How you feel. How you feel about that. So, if you look at the next slide, please. Okay. Look at the green. Dispositions. Socio-emotional skills or behaviors that associate with success in college, career, and citizenship. So the children now need to learn the socio-emotional. What the heck is that? Well, I think it means that you've got to feel sorry that man has made global warming. That you really need to feel bad because once they've got you emotionally injected in everything, I think that you feel bad a lot. And you want to feel better about stuff. I watched a little piece of where a teacher was going around a table, and it was supposed to be a piece that showed us how great this new reading program is. This is in Common Core. This is before Common Core. And so she would go student to student and say, well, how do you interpret that passage in that book? And these are like third graders. And they'd say, well, it's about, the teacher having to give away her pet for the summer because there was nobody at the building to take care of the pet. And, the teacher said, well, how does that make you feel? Or how do you think the teacher felt about that? And I thought, what are we doing? Why are we wasting time on making them understand and evaluate somebody's emotions? You get it? I don't. I don't have an answer. You guys can help me. But I don't understand the push to have an emotional tie to math or have an emotional tie to fiction necessarily. I mean, I think we want the children to interpret their reading, but this whole emotional thing I don't get. Does anybody want to help me with that? Yeah.
I like some of the leadership initiative. It seems like they're trying to teach hard work. That seems like a positive.
Exactly.
So
I see that as a positive.
The baby out with the bathwater.
I know. But socio-emotional. I think there's an over-exaggeration.
The whole picture they're looking at probably thinks it's a problem. But I think truthfully, overall, they put so much more emphasis on the social awareness and empathy. The other stuff doesn't get nearly as much attention as that. How do we feel about this? How do we feel about this other person? How does that make you feel? Because that overrides, I think, almost everything else. And they start into that kind of stuff.
I don't get it. I really don't. And I know that, Dr. Spock has some books out, and he, in the 1970s, encouraged parents to, make children a part of your decision on where to go as a family. And we didn't do that, guys. And maybe I'm a bad parent. But somebody just asked me the other day if I wanted to, buy their house from them, and would you have to bring the kids through and ask them? I said, no. When they start paying the bills, I'll ask them what they think, but until then, it's our decision. But I don't think that children are ready for a lot of these emotional things we're putting on them, and I think it's an increased burden. And I think we ought to just say this, it's this way, period. 2 + 2 is 4, end of story. Yeah.
Leadership is a skill. It's not an emotion. If you learn
Right.
to be a leader,
No, I agree with that. I agree with a lot of the things they listed there. They make sense. Is that what you're saying?
like their skills.
I agree.
It's not an emotion. It's
Right.
a skill that you learn.
Well, that's what I was thinking. An initiative, that's all good. I mean, we want them to,
Skill, right.
should be a skill.
It's
So
not part of your emotional. But aren't these things that parents should be teaching? Amen.
maybe the emotional response, but the leadership and those other things, I'm okay with those being on there, and those are important things for kids to learn. But that still doesn't describe the emotional connection that they're making. Right. So things here are not jiving. To me,
If you concentrate on the knowledge and the skills, the other things will come. They just fall in place because you're concentrating on the work part.
it does. That makes sense. Yeah. We want them to know leadership. We want them to know resilience. We want them to understand that stuff. But that's not emotional necessarily. That's a skill set. You're right. They're almost in the wrong column. Yes.
Well, if you listen to Obama, he's all about touchy-feely.
Emotional.
So emotional. So if he can get to you that way, then he can manipulate you more. And that's what he's all about, control.
Right.
If you control your emotions, then he can get his way.
And I agree. That when you look at this list,
Validate his position. It's
Right.
not emotion because they don't have any reasonable basis.
right, we have to feel bad about the polar bear ice cap melting, and have to feel bad about that. And we have to feel shame that we're responsible and we're bad people, and we need the government to make us not bad people. I mean, I'm translating.
You watch TV and it happens every year.
Yes, I agree. I with you. Did you have a comment? I'm sorry.
Yeah, and I think it's their way of getting people to conform to their views. If you have a view that is against what they have to say, then it will be shunned from the rest of the class to be able to, not only that, not be able to figure out more about your family, your upbringing, and whether they should send you this way or give you a free pass.
Yeah, I think facts are facts, and leadership skills, you're right, adaptability, resilience, initiative, ethical behavior, and civic responsibility. Boy, that sends flags in my head. We want the federal government teaching our children civic responsibility. That means pay your taxes first, kind of thing. Try to think about eating later. Next slide, please. Okay. Students ready for college and careers exhibit content knowledge, life skills, readiness behaviors, college and career survival skills. So again, none of this is objectionable necessarily. It just sometimes some of the wording brings a lot of questions to my mind about why is that important? How does that translate? Okay, next slide, please. Okay, President Reagan stopped the associations with UNESCO, United Nations Education, Scientific, and Cultural Organization. President Bush in 2003 rejoined UNESCO. They specifically pushed the UN agenda, and it's called the International Baccalaureate, or IB program. Have you heard about that?
Yes.
That is in many schools. We have not in Springboro brought in IB, but IB is a program that pushes the global agenda. Okay? And it's probably in your schools. It's in high schools. It's followed by Bill Gates Foundation, the agreement with them to support their agenda and the UN Constitution, not the U.S. Constitution.
I'm
Yes.
sorry, Nick. International Baccalaureate Program is actually my daughter is enrolled in that at Firestone High School. It is a global program, but what it does is it's an academic level, one above AP classes. The reason that she's there is the acceptance rate of universities like Duke and higher level universities is higher for international baccalaureate education. It simply is the data supports the educational advanced level of international baccalaureate. We're there because Medina can no longer offer AP classes.
So Medina-
And by the way, bachelorette, that's not the, it's baccalaureate.
I-
Understand.
Yeah, I didn't catch that. Thank you. But you're saying that Medina no longer offers AP classes?
The Medina no longer offers the AP classes that they did 4 years ago.
Why?
Same number.
The
Why would that be?
Because the funding is no longer there.
Okay, so instead of offering an advanced level of education, those students then that would have taken that then are in now IB.
No, we
Okay.
had to, she had to find it, because we went on college tours and said, you must find the classes. That was how we could get the class. They've opened enrollment to that advanced program, and that's why she's there. What's happening in Medina is a lot of the kids are funding post-secondary classes.
PSEO, which is great.
Which is great, except for if you go to some place like Duke, that is not good enough. They don't want
Okay,
that.
so why are AP, I mean, this is a whole other conversation probably outside of this, but why is AP more expensive than regular English? Or regular science?
It has
Or
to do with total
what-
number of teachers